Good evening. Another Friday night is upon us. Once again, we are having a follow-up show concerning the Molly Young case. Several weeks ago, I was contacted by Molly's father, and I'm ashamed to say that the reason I fell into this was I started seeing signs around town. I was born and raised in Marion. I started seeing signs that said Justice for Molly. I saw a few people that had bracelets on that said Justice for Molly, and right around that time, I was contacted by Larry Young that said, hey, you reached out to me in the very beginning and asked me if I'd like to be on your show. I was not ready then. I didn't have all my facts together or all my reports together then. I was in horrible grief then. And he said, I'm ready now, and I have to ask you a question. Would you consider playing the 911 call? And I said, why hasn't anyone played the 911 call? And he said, well, there's been several news medias around that 4 months ago I gave them the 911 call and they wouldn't play it. And I said, I'll play it as many times as you'd like. So me being a neutral person that didn't know anything about this case or either of the people involved in this case, I met with Molly's father. I knew that the media and Richie Minton had said that it was a suicide. I spoke with Molly's father for the first time, and he said, I am convinced 100% it was a murder. He started giving me his facts, and I started saying, whoa. And then I got a hold of the inquest, which some of the people are just, there was a press conference recently, and one of the things that the state's attorney pointed out there in Jackson County was, hey, I think that everybody should get a hold of this inquest. And I saw the inquest weeks and weeks ago. And the first several, probably 30, 40 pages of it, I thought, okay, yeah, some of this looks bad. The way they're presenting this, I need to dig into this more. It looks like maybe she committed suicide. But once I started getting to the forensics and the meat and potatoes of this situation, I said, something is wrong. Why would a girl shoot herself with her non-dominant hand in the top left side of her head? Why would she have this person's DNA under her fingernails? Why would he have these scratches on his back? Why this, why this, why this, why this? So initially I thought, I'm going to prove to myself this is a suicide so I can sleep at night. And then I can say, she wanted to end her life, she did, and I can go to bed. But the more I dug into it, and the more facts I started collecting, and the more police reports I started seeing, and the more people I started talking to, it became more and more and more apparent to me that this screams murder. And if you have not joined yet, there is a group on Facebook called Justice for Molly. And in 16 months, this group had accumulated 6,000 people. We aired the first show where we played the 911 call, and people got to actually hear Molly Young's father. And in 3 days, it went from 6,000 people to 12,000 people. My shows typically, hey, I'm on AM radio and I'm proud of it. And I've got some good topics, I feel like. But my SoundCloud bites would get 200, 300, 400. You know, my mom would call me and say, hey, girl, 400 people listen to your SoundCloud bite. Isn't that great? When I ran the first Molly Young show, it within 1 week had 6,000 hits. It's now almost had 9,000 hits. There's something going on with this case, even for people all over the United States that's hitting home with them saying something is wrong. We've seen this, we've seen that. We've heard the smear campaign that some people are trying to do saying, oh, she was depressed. Depression doesn't equal suicide. One of the things I keep hearing the experts say is just because some people appear suicidal has totally nothing to do with the act of suicide. And we have so many different things to get into this evening. I thought as soon as we did the first show, I thought this is national newsworthy. Some of the things in this case make me think cover up. Some of the things in this thing, because of the connection that this person has with law enforcement, makes me think, uh-oh, who this person's father is and his connection with computer forensics makes me think, uh-oh. And I'm still the person that wants to believe that everybody's honest and truthful. But once you start digging and digging and digging, and then I got into this group called Behind the Blue Wall. There is an epidemic, everyone, in the United States of America where girlfriends and wives of law enforcement people, whether it be dispatchers or cops, are being murdered, and it's set up to look like suicide. That's something I had no idea about. I've been researching, and I thought, oh my God. So from the beginning, I have with me this evening Jack and Ange from Disclosure. They have literally followed this case from the beginning. They were at the inquest. I have one of Molly's dear friends with me, Kyle Johnson, this evening. He appeared on the Dr. Drew show last night. He is one of Molly's best friends. And I also have Molly's father, Larry, with me this evening. And we have a million different things to cover. But I want to start off with Jack and Ange. How did you guys pick up the story? And at what point in time did you say, woo-oo, something's weird?
Yeah, we picked it up on the podcast when we were doing our regular weekend podcasts. And we actually heard about it the day it occurred. But we were headed over to DeSoto to do a book signing, and we couldn't address it right on that podcast. So I told Jack, we need to come right back within a couple of days and do another podcast to make sure we mention this, because there's something stinky about this. And that was the day it happened. I'll never forget it, March 24th, 2012. And we did subsequent podcasts on it. That being in media as long as we have, I started in radio in 1980 and started in news.
You almost have a sixth sense for this type of thing.
Yeah, you do. Jack has been in print since 1992. We know when you see, sometimes you just look at a surface thing.
Well, and one of the most glaring things that we saw right off the bat that made us not set it down and start really to dissect it was that they let Richie Minton wash his hands. They allowed the only living individual in this room,
apartment,
the room,
where this,
get up and wash his hands.
Okay,
that just reeks.
Well, and at the recent press conference that was called by Mike Carr, and in my opinion, like I say, my first show, I said, I'm just here to give the family a platform. And I think I might have said that my second one. At this point in time, I'm educated on this case and I have very strong opinions. And like I was telling you before we went on air, these people, the Illinois State Police, the state's attorney, everybody involved, they are public officials. They are people that are tax-paying dollars. We pay their salary. Right. I want them to do their job. Yeah, my husband works 900 feet underground, 60 hours a week. Very dangerous job that he could die any second of any day to pay their salaries. And when I find out the way that Larry and Linda and Kathy have been treated by some of these officials, it sickens me. Not only are they grieving their daughter's death, they are getting treated like second-class citizens.
Wait till we get in here in a little bit about the checkpoint that we all had to go through before they would allow us into the Illinois State Police headquarters, where Mike Carr, who has a nice office that all you taxpayers are paying for, apparently didn't want to use. He was surrounded by a small army of Illinois State Police officers.
Oh, at this press conference?
Yes, ma'am.
This past Monday in DuQuoin. He held it in DuQuoin. Why in DuQuoin? So he could be protected by ISP there, so he could make an impact on the rest of us who were trying to go.
And they made everybody sign in, and they wanted credentials from everybody. I own my damn newspaper. I don't have credentials. If I walked in there with credentials saying I was the Illinois State Police District Commander, they're going to set me down in his office? I mean, who are they going to call to verify who I am? I own the darn thing.
Well, and I wanted to play a clip from the show. Did I almost Freudian slip that?
Almost.
From the press conference, because one of the questions that was asked was about whether or not Richie Minton was allowed to wash his hands. Brian, if you have the clip from the press conference with Mike Carr, can you please play the clip about the hand washing?
There is a rumor, and you can ask about specifics, I guess, and I'll tell you whether or not I can answer them. When you're talking about admissible evidence, that a police agency allowed for an individual to clean his hands. And it's my understanding that perhaps the source of that information came from someone in law enforcement who talked about that. Having looked at the evidence, and again, I'm limited to what I can say because it's not part of that record, but I do feel like that it's important to clear up that I have found no evidence whatever that was allowed or intentionally allowed by any law enforcement officer. But that does not change, ultimately, the evidence that I'm left with. And the evidence I'm left with is I have to deal with what I have. And so, as one might imagine, without being allowed to, the police officers did not arrive there as soon as this happened. And all I can tell you is that there is no evidence that would support, that I found, that suggests that a law enforcement agent knew of, allowed that to happen.
Okay, so we just heard from State's Attorney Mike Carr, there is no evidence that he has seen that anybody allowed Richie Minton to wash his hands.
That's a lie.
He was very careful with how he worded that.
I want to comment on that one.
Larry, go ahead with that.
I have in my hand here 6 documents officially from the Illinois State Police and the Carbondale PD, including the officer that let him wash his hands and change clothes and go in the bathroom alone, unescorted. And I don't know, it really concerns me that if he doesn't know these documents exist, how familiar is he with this case?
He's either lying or he didn't look.
Let me see that.
Somebody ought to ask Mike Carr which one it is.
Okay, so right here on September 24th, 2012 at 9 a.m., I am looking at an Illinois, here it is, camera, whichever camera you can see. This is Illinois State Police report, speaking of, and an officer talking about somebody walking in and then letting him wash his hands.
It's right there. And Mike Carr stood there surrounded by a swarm of Illinois State Police officers saying that he has seen no evidence. That's evidence, people. That's documentation.
But he didn't see it.
It's up to a jury, if it ever gets
it.
in front of one, to decide the veracity of that evidence.
But it does concern me as a father of my daughter, and I think she's murdered, and he isn't familiar enough with the case to know 6 pieces of evidence in his possession or exist. It bothers me.
One of the things that bothers me the most is that from the beginning, the parents of Molly Young have had to be investigators. Larry Young has a laundry list of basic investigative things that should have been done, like collecting the phone records of Mr. Richie Minton, collecting the phone records of the people he was with that night, collecting the phone records of his roommate, Wes Romack, collecting the phone records of his mother and father. We know that his mother and his mother and father and attorney were there very early on the scene. We need to see the phone records of these people to see exactly what time they received calls from their son saying, hey, you need to get here.
And Mike Carr's done none of this?
I've been requesting that and certified mail even for months. And he's never got anybody's phone records that I've requested. I don't understand that. Why not?
Isn't that basic? I want to talk about this particular report right here. Jeff Ritter of the Carbondale Times, everybody stand up if you're at home listening. Do a standing ovation and a thank you, God, for Jeff Ritter. From the beginning, along with Jack and Ange, he has fought for this case. He has reported on this case. He FOIA'd the records. He is very, very, very knowledgeable about exactly what's going on here. And in the Carbondale Times, just 2 days ago, he released this particular document. And this is from September 24th. Now, mind you, March 24th is the date of this incident. So 6 months later, there is correspondence, a telephone conversation, and I believe it's from one of the Illinois State Police to the other, and it says, reason for call. Called to request submission of clothing from victim and suspect. 6 months later, we're saying the words victim and suspect. Victim was found in suspect's bedroom with gunshot wound to the head. Suspect does not recall incident, nor remember hearing a gun discharge in the bedroom. Suspect says that he was drunk and called the victim to come over to help him because he threw up on himself. What the hell are you talking about?
Anybody find any vomit in the room?
Yeah.
Did you even do a basic investigation to find out if there's vomit in the room?
So how
or did
many-
they let him clean that up
That's
too
his
with his
story.
hands?
How many grown men call an ex-girlfriend over to... I'm throwing up. And one thing I have confirmed through several friends of Molly's, several friends of Richie's, they say he didn't turn 21 this night and just had a binger. He's very well accustomed to this type of thing. Suspect says victim came over and helped him change into his pajama pants. Afterwards, he conveniently passed out. Of course, conveniently isn't in this document. When suspect woke up, he found the victim. Victim's family does not believe she committed suicide. Right here. This was in the paper. This is a document from state police. Based upon angle of victim's wound, suspect was either standing over victim when she was shot or standing on the bed. SA thinks the most likely possibility is that suspect was standing on the bed. The following clothing will be submitted: victim's clothing, suspect pajama pants, suspect shirt, suspect shorts. I can tell you blood spatter was found on the lower half of Richie Minton's pants. Let me say that again. Blood spatter was found on the lower part of Richie Minton's pants.
I didn't know that.
If he was tucked into bed with his cover on and she supposedly killed herself, how the hell did he get blood spatter on his pajama
Why
pants?
just the lower half? Because he was standing on the bed?
Is that
And
part of
that's
what
where it
Mike
would
Carr
go?
didn't read?
Now,
He didn't know that either?
Now, mind you, this is in September, 6 months after
Well,
this incident.
Mike Wepsick was still there.
Why does it take 6 months, and why does it take somebody to ask?
I think I
Can we
just said
please
the
check?
reason why.
Can we please have some evidence here?
Yeah.
We've got several more documents, and like I said, I do have strong opinions at this point, but they are all from documents like these. These are FOIA'd, which means Freedom of Information Act, requested by Larry Young. And I can also tell you what we believe are public record. If you do something bad or I do something bad and we get arrested, what we believe that we can go in and ask for and them hand you over, this family has had to fight like hell and get talked horribly to and been degraded in meetings with some of these public officials as if they did something wrong.
Right.
As if grieving the death of their daughter wasn't bad enough. They have been talked to like SHIT. We have to take our first break. Please stay with us. We have so much more. We're back. We're talking this evening again about the Molly Young case. So much has transpired since I first covered this story several weeks ago. This story now has national media attention. This case has been covered on the Dr. Drew Show. This case has been covered on the Jane Velez Show. And for those of you that are just joining us, I know by the minute people are finding out about this and joining the Justice for Molly page and looking at the website justiceformolly.org. This case is so complex and multi-layered, it really does take people weeks to grasp it. You know, the basics are a 21-year-old beautiful girl died in the apartment of her boyfriend by his gun. He says suicide. So many of the facts of this case are blatantly screaming murder. I want to go ahead because one of the main things in this case that just draws everybody in is what takes place on the 911 call. Brian, if you have the 911 call queued up, can you please play that for me?
911, what's your emergency?
Hi, we have a person at my living facility who we believe to be dead.
Okay, where's that at?
We're at 500. Here.
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, I'm at 500 Northwest Ridge Drive, apartment A2.
Okay, and who is this to you?
It's my ex-girlfriend.
And how old is she?
She's 22.
Okay, and is she not breathing at all?
No, I woke up and she's covered in blood. She's overdosed. She bled out through the nose.
And you said she's 23?
22.
22? What's her name?
911, what is your emergency?
Hey, I'm going to send an ambulance,
Amber.
but they have a 1079.
Amber,
Yeah.
this is Richie. My girlfriend just committed suicide. Can you send an ambulance, or can you send a car over 500 Northwest Ridge, apartment A2?
A2?
Yeah.
Yep, we'll be on our way.
Thanks, Amber.
Alrighty, bye.
Can I go ahead and hang up?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and hang up. I'll go ahead and send an ambulance that way, though.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the first time I heard this 911 call was my preliminary meeting before the first show with Larry Young. And I just sat there, baffled.
The dispatcher's more upset than Richie, who is speaking very clearly for somebody who passed out from too much alcohol.
Okay,
And barfed on himself.
there's so many different issues with the 911 call. Number one, his alibi is, I was so drunk. I was so passed out drunk. I did not hear a 45 semi-automatic 1911 Taurus go off. Brian, I don't know if you have that queued up, and trust me, the sound clip I have of this absolutely cannot do it justice. I went and got to put my hands on this gun, see this gun, feel this gun, and hear this gun shot. The concussion of this gun literally shook my insides, and all I could think was, unless you were so comatose drunk needing medical attention on the verge of death yourself, there's no way you could sleep through this.
And you sure as heck wouldn't be able to talk on the phone that clearly seconds later.
Absolutely not. They said the guy that let me shoot the gun is, a member of the NRA. He teaches gun safety classes. He said one shot from this gun, first of all, can give you hearing loss. I had protective hearing on, and the sound of this gun literally took me to the ground thinking, this just is another reason that confirms. If you have that gunshot, let's go ahead and hear that, please. And I want to remind you, I recorded this with my cell phone. It doesn't do it justice, but just try to listen to the concussion of this gun. And imagine being in a 9x13 room saying, oh, somebody shot their cell feet from me, and I just did not happen to hear it. He doesn't have it?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't have it queued up yet, I don't think.
Okay, that's okay. We'll get to that.
He's working hard on it, though.
Okay. Just talking about the 911 call in general. Okay, I know that Wes Romack, who initiated the call, and Richie are both young 20s. I'll tell you, I've never in my life, and I can't imagine waking up to somebody that I consider a friend, as in Wes's situation, or somebody that I've loved supposedly more than life itself for 2 years, and saying, hi, we have someone in our living facility whom we believe to be dead. What? Am I off base? Am I crazy? I'd say, oh my gosh, my friend, we think she's dead.
I'm not sure anybody would be able to understand you or me.
We have someone in our living facility whom we believe to be dead. And later on in the show, I'd like to say that the instant I got a hold of this case and did my first show, I reached out to Wes Romack. I know that the national news media has recently, and he will only say, hi, I can't talk about this. Hi, thank you for calling, but whatever. I have a lengthy back and forth.
Why can't Wes talk about this now?
Yeah. Somebody directed him to do that?
Does he have an attorney?
What's the deal?
I think he said at this point to the national news media and some other people, my family has advised me not to talk about, even though I'm telling you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I'm not being forced to be quiet. I'm not scared to be quiet. I've been advised not to speak about this.
I've been advised not to tell the truth. There you go. That's very American for you. Thanks, Wes.
So the 911 call, nobody ever called Molly by her name. That bothers me. This is my ex-girlfriend. This is my so-and-so. This is my such and such.
It's like he was ordering pizza.
It's upsetting me.
Well, he was. If you compare the voices.
Now listen, everybody's saying though. Well, he was a 911 dispatcher, and if you're a 911 dispatcher, you hear the craziest things every day, and you're calm. Listen, let me tell you something, everybody. You may be trained every day to hear this, that, and the other. Look at the person next to you. Look at your husband or wife on the couch right now. Look at your son or daughter on the couch right now. If any one of them you wake up to dead by what you're calling a self-inflicted wound, tell me that you could call the police right now and say, she's this. Now, second of all, she's bled out the nose. She's overdosed. She's dead. Wait a minute. I read the inquest from beginning to end probably 30 times by now. And even though it's hard to grasp and even though it's horrible to say, let me give you very specifics of what they said out of the autopsy report. Molly had a large gunshot wound to her head. She had chunks of coagulated blood in her blonde hair. There was asymmetry to the face. Do you understand what that means, everybody? Asymmetry means that there was visual disformation of this girl's face. You tell me that he woke up and took one look at her and thought that was an overdose. How degrading. And then to know that he would not agree to a search warrant. He did not go to her funeral. He did not go to her visitation. He not once called her parents. Shall I continue? Opinions?
I wonder if they also train the 911 operators to get teetotally drunk where they pass out, and then you can wake up in a split second. You're speaking very, very clearly and calmly. Is that part of their training too? I don't want to hear he was a 911 operator. That's why he was calm. He was supposedly drunk, so drunk he didn't hear a cannon go off in his room.
He was supposed to go. He was supposed to be at work at 7:00 in the morning.
He was supposed to be at work at 7.
But what time did this call happen?
9:02 was it, Larry?
9:02.
9:02 in the morning. This call is made.
Can they dispatch with the blood alcohol content that high? Oh, did anybody take his blood?
Yes, at 7 p.m.
That's convenient.
Being in law enforcement, in my opinion, if he woke up and his girlfriend had shot herself in the head, he would have said, I'm not touching her. Every bit of evidence that's going to point to her suicide is laying right there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to call 911. I'm going to say she has a gunshot wound to the head. I'm going to be distraught because she killed herself. And I'm going to call her mom and dad. And I'm going to call her friends. And I'm going to get with them. And I'm going to be the first one at that visitation. And I'm going to be the last one on that casket at the funeral. Because this is somebody I loved and cared about for the last 2 years. None of it.
None of it.
None of it.
Instead, what did he do?
Wouldn't agree to a search warrant.
Lawyered up,
and let somebody that he claims to be the love of his life lay there lifeless for 7 hours.
While he washed his hands.
While he changed his clothes and washed his hands. Because after the 911 call, it's in his statement, then he did CPR. He called in a death. We believe she's dead. He didn't ask for an ambulance. He said send a car. And then in his statement that I have read, it says, then he went and performed CPR. And one of the police officers, and we have the records right here. I'm not quoting it verbatim, but it is sitting in front of us. Notice this scratch. You've got scratches. What's that from? She must have scratched me during CPR.
When she was dead.
Yeah.
I'd also like to see in the 911 training where they have you start CPR after you already know somebody's deceased.
This is insanity. We actually have a caller right now.
I would like to add
one
thing.
Go ahead, Larry.
The paramedics that were first on the scene, just a few minutes after 9, smelt no alcohol on his breath. At 2 a.m. when he gave 2 women a ride back to their apartment.
He drove a car.
He
at 2
drove a
a.m.?
car, and they said he had no problem driving. And he didn't drink anything after 2 a.m. and stayed up till 4 a.m. text messaging people back and forth coherently. So how was he so drunk that he passed out?
And didn't hear a cannon go off in his room.
So this is somebody that we know and we have documented as driving people home at 2 a.m. We have him text messaging according to phone records and inquest records that he was text messaging people and calling people until 4 a.m, but then went so incoherent, could not hear this, what they call a thunderstorm in your hands going off. We have so much more to bring you. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please give us a call, 618-993-8102. We'll be right back. We're back. We're talking about the Molly Young case this evening. So many things have transpired since the first time I did the show. And one thing that I want to talk about right this minute is what the mass media, the national media, originally coined as the quote-unquote suicide letter. One thing at the press conference that I remember Mike Carr saying was, we have compelling evidence to believe it was a suicide. And he kept speaking about the suicide letter, the suicide letter, the suicide letter. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this speak of the suicide letter. This quote-unquote suicide letter was found not in the apartment with Molly whenever she was deceased at Richie's apartment. It was not found on the table counter as she left her home that night to go to Richie's apartment. Not taped to a mirror, not left out anywhere for anybody to find. This was found under Molly's bed in her home. This did not have a date on it. This journal entry, as everybody in her family and her friends are calling it, it listed every single specific person that was close to her. And guess what, everybody? About a year prior to her death, or in about that vicinity of time, Molly thought she had thyroid cancer. I have a sister that had thyroid cancer, and I can tell you it wasn't a good time in her life. And I can tell you that her hormones were all over the place, and she was not in a very good place, and it was very scary. I've talked to Violet, who is a very dear friend of Molly's. I've talked to Molly's sisters. I've talked to Molly's dad. I've talked to Molly's mom. And I've talked to another one of Molly's very dear friends, Kyle Johnson, who happens to be sitting in front of me this evening. And they all say, when they read this letter, this was old. Matter of factly, this was old. I can tell. She and her sister Holly. She mentions her sister Holly in this letter. I wish we were closer, blah, blah, blah. Holly said, the last year she was here, we were at the movies maybe once a week. We were doing this, we were doing that. 2 days before she passed away.
And State's Attorney Mike Carr was told all of this, correct?
Was he aware of it?
Did Mike Carr or the Illinois State Police or anybody?
The Illinois State Police interviewed Holly, and I believe, did they interview you, Colin?
Yes, they did. I was at school, so I don't really remember what they. It was all a blur then. So
they interviewed several people that were around.
Who were adamant about
yeah.
This doesn't count. This was a long time ago.
But in the documents, that's all redacted, so I can't say exactly what they put down that they said.
Now,
So-
Monica, you know that was my question.
Yes, I saw at the
That
press
I
conference
got.
you said,
I
where did you
asked.
find this? And he said,
He said he couldn't say. It was in her room. I said, where exactly? He said, well, I'm not at liberty.
well, it was under her bed.
Yes,
and it was
that's
found
what I
with a
was
bunch of
trying to
other-
get him to say.
Well, and the thing that makes me so mad is they have done a very thorough investigation of Molly Young. They said they have compelling evidence to believe through the text messages and through journal entries and through online media. Now, wait a minute, everybody. We have another here whenever we're talking about computer forensics, when we're talking about specialties in computers.
Yeah,
Does anybody want to go there?
The suspect's daddy's an expert, actually works for the federal government in forensics with
Has
computers.
since 2009,
If you-
August 8th, 2009.
August 8th, 2009. If you go to LinkedIn and you look up Richie's father, his name is Richard Flip Minton. He has very, very serious credentials with computer forensics. I think he might actually be the guy that whenever people are busted for child porn, he's the one that analyzes the computer, this, that, and the other. One thing that blew my socks off, is whenever I met with Larry for our first interview, and he starts going through these police reports that he's given me, and he says, look at this right here. We have correspondence via email from Richie Minton's father, Flip Minton, to the Illinois State Police, directing them, you might want to check out Molly's such and such blog. You might want to check, whoa. We have the suspect's father corresponding and directing the Illinois State Police on things to investigate in this case.
And
Am I
apparently,
insane?
And apparently they did. And apparently that's all they did.
Well, and you know what? When they're saying we are giving, this is compelling evidence, if you are giving Molly's Facebook, Zanga, Tumblr, compelling weight, please give the same weight to Richie's. I've been on his social medias, and there are some very disturbing things. One thing that Molly's father talks about often is 3 weeks before her death, something he decided to post was Son of Sam, Ted Bundy, and drops of lead poured upon her head until she was dead.
And then she died of a gunshot wound.
She died March 24th. This person posted on March 23rd.
I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything about Richie Minton's Facebook, email. The authorities haven't said word one about any of it.
If Richie Minton would not have been law enforcement and the police would have responded to a 911 call where somebody said, we have someone in our living facility whom we believe to be dead, and then somebody else gets on the phone and said, she's overdosed, she bled out of her nose, blah, 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 and they got there and there was a gunshot wound, both of those boys would have had their ass locked up right then on the spot. How many people that actually pulled the trigger or murdered somebody said, oh, you're here, you caught me, I did it. I don't understand why they both weren't taken in. I don't understand why basic things that should have been done from the beginning have not been done.
There's no way in the world they were following standard protocol. No way in the world. If they had been, if this is their standard protocol, there wouldn't be a murder case in the state of Illinois because they wouldn't catch any damn body.
Yeah, this is what caught our eye.
This is not
when we went to do that
standard
follow-up,
protocol.
When we went to do that follow-up podcast and nobody was in custody yet, 3 days later, we were going, there's a cover-up going on here.
And they knew they had a problem.
Obvious.
They know they have a problem. They have shifted officers. That's telling the truth. They'd shifted them out of the limelight.
Stan Diggs.
Okay, for instance, the first day, Larry got to speak with one of the main investigators on the case, Lieutenant Stan Diggs. What did Lieutenant Stan Diggs tell you to your face that day?
I met with him in front of the Carbondale Police Station, and one of the first things he told me was, father to father, Carbondale PD botched this case. They let him wash his hands and change clothes.
Stan Diggs is probably one of the few remaining true blue, straight up.
I have heard nothing but wonderful things about Stan Diggs.
I've watched Stan's work for over 20 years, and I'm telling you, Stan's been shifted because Stan told the truth. Now, why is one of the people in the suspect's house being told not to tell the truth to the public? Why are you shifting a decorated Illinois State Police investigator? Why are you shifting him off the case? Because he's telling the truth. Why would you do that? You can discipline somebody if you think they've gone a little bit too far. But if they're telling the truth, they're the only one digging and the only one treating the parents like they're human beings who've lost a daughter. When you move him, Mike Carr, something stinks here, and it isn't going to go away.
It stings bad. It stings bad. And that's why there is a movement of 20,000 plus people that can't let this go.
And that's why media, who normally see themselves as competition, don't. Not on this.
Everybody's joining
Yeah.
On
forces
this
with
don't
subject,
care.
it doesn't matter who you work for. If you're radio, TV,
You know
print
what?
media, it doesn't
Absolutely.
matter.
One thing that struck me was I was at home. I had to pick my son up. I was at home for the press conference. And one thing I kept hearing from Mike Carr, and I do want to get to the gunpowder residue comment. Google it
Right.
in just a second. But one thing that struck me was Mike Carr said, "Hey, I happened to knock on the door of Molly's grandmother when I was campaigning, and I made a promise to her that I would do everything I could. I would exhaust all options to make sure that we did the most thorough investigation." Well, that's Molly's grandmother. And from what I hear from the family, there was a little bit different of a scenario whenever they went in there. Were you present for the meeting whenever Colleen was with you and she asked about the particular gun in this situation?
No, I don't believe I was there. I had to drive about 25 miles.
I was told by another family member that they were in this meeting, and Colleen had said, "What kind of gun was it?" And he said, "You mean we've been doing this investigation for this many months and you don't know what kind of gun it was? You're wasting my time."
He spoke to the deceased girl's grandmother like that.
That's what I've been told
I wonder if he kisses his mother with that mouth.
by another family member. That upsets me.
It should.
My
It should
husband's
upset
doing
anybody.
the job he's doing, that many feet deep, that dangerous, to pay our tax dollars for that.
And he's donating to Mike Carr's paycheck so he can get up there and lie
Here's
and
another
belittle
thing.
somebody's grandma.
Here's another thing that upset me very, very bad. Whenever they were at the press conference, why did he not say, "This is an ongoing investigation. We are encouraging anyone with information to come forward. We want more evidence. We want to see exactly what happened here." To me, I felt like he was like,
because
maybe
they
on
don't.
the defense.
It
Well,
was
there- there's only so many answers to that question. They don't want any more evidence. They want this to go away in the worst of ways. They want it to go away.
Larry, what are some of the things that you asked the police to do? Gather phone records of Mr. Minton's parents?
Interview Amber Pellegrini and find out if she had sent police officers out that morning before the 911 call to check on him.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Amber Pellegrini was the second person on the 911 call. Richie was to go in that morning at 7 a.m. and relieve her as the dispatcher. Everybody knows in law enforcement, if somebody doesn't show up for work, they call.
Right.
When they don't call, they go check.
Officer safety.
Exactly.
Certainly. That's routine.
We know for sure that Amber was trying to communicate with Richie, texting him and calling him, "Where are you? What's going on? What's going on?"
Richie was busy. Doing what?
The problem with that is Amber Pellegrini in her report says she deleted all her text messages that very morning that she with Richie Minton.
Why?
Because she didn't know she was going to have to write this report. And she wrote the report the same day it happened.
If you're at work and your coworker doesn't show up, you say, "Hey, what's up? Come on, where are you at?" Whether it's McDonald's or 911 dispatcher or whatever, why would you ever delete those messages hours later?
And if there's a death involved, you wouldn't delete them. You wouldn't delete them
That
for any
upsets me.
reason.
That upsets me. So, have we ever asked the police? Did anybody go check on Richie that morning?
Yes, we've asked them that.
And the answer?
They told us no.
Okay, one of the things on the mainstream media that everybody keeps talking about is, "Hey, where's the roommate? What's going on with the roommate? Why hasn't he said anything?" Whatever. I reached out to Mr. Romack after I did my first show, never ever imagining that I'd get a response, and I basically just said, "Hey,
Now, this is Wes who lives in the facility.
this is Wes Romack, who is in the living facility."
Okay,
In the
facility.
living facility,
All right,
yes.
Okay.
And I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I just recently have become aware of the situation. I really think you might have walked into a nightmare that morning. It has been confirmed that he worked at Panera Bread that evening and he got off at 5:22 or clocked out at 5:22. Let's put him home at 5:30, 5:40. What we do know for sure is that Molly's phone, and I'm going to say Molly's phone because when we're dealing with forensic specialists on computers and those phones were taken over, I don't know who texted from Molly's phone, but Molly's phone did message Wes Romack at about 2 or 3 in the morning and said, "I'm at your apartment. Richie's not doing good." Wes didn't reply back, but told the police, "I got those messages, but my phone died." Well, an hour later, there were 2 more text messages sent from Molly's phone, and one of them said, "I went through Richie's phone. He was texting Chloe saying he needed her. I think I'm going to get a gun and shoot myself in the head. I'm sorry if you come home to this. In Wes's statement, he said, I got the first 2 messages. My phone died. I did not get the second 2. I went home about 5:30 or 5:40. I saw Molly's shoes and purse. I looked in Richie's room. I noticed that he was asleep. I went in my room. I plugged in my phone. I checked my messages. He texted Molly, everybody, and said, I'm home. Richie's asleep. What happens when your phone dies and you get messages from somebody and you plug it in? Those messages come through.
Right.
He told police when they came back a couple days later and confronted him, whoa. Your phone had messages from Molly saying, I'm going to shoot myself in the head? Why didn't you check on her? I didn't notice those. He told me something very different, and as soon as we come back from the break, I'm going to tell you exactly, because I have it here in black and white via Facebook chat, exactly what he said. Very discrepant. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. We're talking about the Molly Young case this evening. There's so many things I want to talk about. Right now, I'm getting ready to talk about the conversation I had with a roommate, Wes Romack. And I'm taking excerpts. I don't have time to read it all because it was rather lengthy. But a couple of the things that really struck me. I was talking to him about, I said, you knew her well. When you went home, you had to see her shoes and her purse. You had to see her car parked there. And he said, I don't know how well I knew her, but I knew her. I sure as hell knew her better than you did. We shared a bathroom. I did see her shoes and purse. That's in my statement. When you get home at 5 a.m., you don't exactly go waking people up. That's rude. It wasn't suspicious. And I said, why would you have checked on Richie? You said that in your statement. And he said, it was an emotionally turbulent time for all. Molly had texted me saying that she was there. She said he wasn't doing well. If you know the case as well as you claim you do, you should know that. And I said, I do. She also texted you saying she was going to shoot herself. You said your phone was dead. However, you went home, plugged your phone in, and texted her saying Richie was asleep. He said, yes, I think about that every day. I feel like I could have saved her. It's hard to live with. I said, the instant you plugged your phone in to charge and text her, you had to see her messages then. And he said, I didn't take it literally. That phrase gets thrown around, you know. I've said it before. I feel like I'm going to shoot myself in the head. Haven't you ever heard of that as a figure of speech? And I said, not someone that you just told me over coffee a few days prior was very depressed. I said, when she texted you saying she was going to shoot herself, why didn't you run home then? And he said, my phone was dead. I didn't get the message until I plugged my phone in. He told me first, I didn't take it literally. And he told me second, I didn't get it till I plugged my phone in that morning. In the police statement, he told them, I did not see that. The police came to him 3 days later and said, we are looking at messages on your phone. She texted you saying, I think I'm going to shoot myself in the head with a gun. And he said, oh, I didn't see that.
But he told you he did.
He
and
told
he gave
me
an answer.
2 different ones.
What does Wes do for a living?
Well, he was at Panera Bread during this point in time. And so I started getting very pushy at one point in time, and I was saying, why is there no gun residue on her hands? Why was he scratched? Why did she have his DNA? Why? And he said, I wish I knew. And then I got a little bit more forceful with him, and I said, do you agree it's possible he shot her? And he said, it's a possibility. Please don't quote me saying that.
Good job.
That bothers me.
It should.
Yeah.
That bothers me really bad. And then he said, I agree with you. These are things I think about every day.
He needs to come forward and start telling the truth and stop being worried or scared about telling the truth. The truth is the truth, Wes.
He told me that he has panic attacks, nightmares, and flashbacks every day. And you know what I said? If you have panic attacks, nightmares, and flashbacks of what you saw when you looked at Molly Young, that further proves to me there's no way in hell Richie mistook that for an overdose.
Yeah.
I say, the autopsy said, large wound to the head.
And if he's having all of those emotional difficulties, I sure hope the hell somebody's checking on him better than he checked on Molly.
I want to talk real quick to Kyle. Kyle, you were a very dear friend of Molly. Many of her other dear friends said, when you talk to Kyle, I want you to make sure you're nice, because Molly loved him very, very much, and she was very protective of him. And last night, one of the questions you were asked that struck me was, what was your opinion of their relationship? Do you feel like it was a healthy relationship?
It wasn't a very healthy relationship at all. I always told Molly to get away from him and stay away, and like I said last night on Dr. Drew, Molly wasn't a very sexual person, whereas Richie is quite the opposite, and that dynamic, I think, was the unhealthy part of their relationship. Very probably manipulative, and he's asked her to do things that I'm sure she wasn't comfortable with. Nothing too extreme, but for Molly's sensibilities, it would have been not good for her.
Is there anything other than the basically the sexual incompatibility that you were talking about? Is there anything else that prompted you to advise Molly that she might want to get out of the relationship with Richie?
Well, from what I know and what she told me, she said that she was hanging out with Richie basically just because she was bored and didn't want to hang out with anybody else or whatever. She was just hanging out with him out of boredom. I said, that's not very healthy for you to do.
Do you know if there were any signs of physical abuse?
No.
Nothing physical that you knew of?
I'm sure she would have told me something like that.
Okay.
That's upsetting.
It is.
Well, like I say, everybody's done a very thorough investigation and public display.
It was a thorough investigation, like you adequately put it. It was a thorough investigation of Molly. I have yet to hear anything that even could be mistaken. Let's get to the
forensic. Let's get to the forensics. You know, the other night on Dr. Drew, they were saying, oh, it's a suicide. She left all these clues and she was very depressed and whatever, she's suicidal. The wonderful forensic doctor who had the yellow flowers, he said, excuse me, everybody. This is what I do for a living. I've done over 500 of these. These look like beautiful, lovely, live flowers. They have the feel of the beautiful, lovely live flowers, but they're not. He said, in this case, it looks like suicide. They're calling it suicide, but it was not a suicide. And Dr. Drew made it a point to say, look, I can take my left hand and put it up to my temple and whatever. First of all, the gunshot wound, and I know I'm on camera, he was pointing here. This is your temporal lobe. Molly's wound was in her frontal lobe. It was 2 1/4 inches above her left ear, a little bit into her scalp, in her frontal lobe like this. Molly was very articulate, very smart. Just one of the things I can't imagine is, hey, let me go through my skull, figure out this gun I've never worked. I hate guns. And one of the things Violet said was, not only did Molly not deal with guns or shoot guns, if you brought up a conversation about guns, it would elicit a negative comment from Molly.
So she's not going to use a weak hand.
Not going to use a weak
suicide.
hand. Not going to go down through her skull. And not, surely to God, not be standing up.
Well, and then there was all the discussion about gunpowder residue.
Gunpowder residue was not found. I need that document. I don't know if we can find it or not. There was one of the police documents, and it was from, I believe, a forensic scientist named Mrs. Wong, to one of the investigators that said, hey, excuse me, there's 0 gunshot residue found on the victim's hands. I'm needing you to go ahead and submit some clothing from the suspect because she would have gunshot residue on her hands. Excuse me?
During the press conference, the only thing that they would say
was Google it.
Google.
Is that clip very short? Okay,
Scott
right now
Rice.
I would like to play a clip from the press conference the other day by one of the investigators talking about gunshot residue. Here we are.
First of all, I'm not an expert in gunshot residue. I'm basing on what I'm going to say on my experience as a crime scene investigator, the training that I've had, the research that I've done on it. The greatest value in gunshot residue is when you have a case in which a individual is reported to have not been around the area in which a gun was fired. And in this case, I don't know if I'm going too specific here, the 2 people were both in the same room. If a handgun were fired in this room right now over here, everybody in this corner may or may not have gunpowder residue on them. It's not an exact science. It's not like a fingerprint. It's either there or it's not. With the gunshot residue, it may be deposited on a particular place or it may not. I would encourage you, because this has been an issue in this case, to do some research on gunshot residue. A simple Google search of when should gunshot residue kits be used or collected, and you'll be interested to see what you come up with. Agencies have a lot of different policies. Many agencies have policies that you do not collect gunshot residue kits if a victim or an offender was known to be in the area where a gunshot was fired. and in the area means typically 10 to 15 feet. So it's of limited value in court, and whether gunshot residue was or was not on a person who's already admitted to being in the area where the gun was fired is of little value.
Okay. What?
It's brilliant. Here's what he left out. He's blowing smoke up everybody's butts to the point they're all going to have a rash that they don't make enough salve for by talking about if anybody were in a room and a gun went off.
So then Molly wasn't in the room, everybody, because she had no gunshot residue.
That's right where I'm going. That everybody and anything in the room could have gunshot residue on it. What he left out in Investigative 101, it's not always what is there, investigator, it's what's not. So when you have the absence of something, you have to explain that. And this pipsqueak is going to sit there and talk to the audience like they're stupid and tell, there'd be gunshot residue all over the place. You can't find anything out about that because everybody have gunshot residue. That's very good, investigator.
Here's what I'm going with.
How about the absence of?
The the expert the other night, he said, Dr. Drew said, well, if she pushed it up really tight, then it all went into her cranium area and it wouldn't have been on her hands. He said, absolutely wrong. She would have had more gunshot residue. He said, this is a murder. Somebody that's done 500 autopsies and does this for a living says it's a murder. I challenge the Illinois State Police and Mike Carr to investigate this thoroughly. Get phone records of everybody, canvass the area, talk to these 36 residents that 3 were only interviewed. We are paying your bills. We want you to find out and give us answers to what happened. I'm not believing for 1 minute this is a suicide, and one way or the other, we will get to the bottom of this.
Amen.
We will continue this. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye-bye.